thank you for joining me today on Maple Leafs Man Advantage. I am Hawkeye, and once again, thanks for joining me in my next video dealing with the Toronto Maple Leafs and looking at some reasons as to maybe why they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. And we're going to talk about some drafts coming into 1970. So it's the Intra-League Draft, the reverse draft, and there's a couple of new teams coming into the NHL for the 1970-71 season. That is the Vancouver Canucks, as well as former GM and coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Punch Imlach, is doing the same thing with the Buffalo Sabres, a new team down in New York there. So there's the expansion draft where they can pick unprotected players off of other teams in the NHL. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at these drafts here today and see what happened with the Leafs. So first on June the 9th, 1970, it was the intra-league draft as well as the reverse draft. So for the intra-league draft, the Leafs just acquired Tom Martin. He's gone. They lose him to the Detroit Red Wings. But they did pick up right winger Guy Trottier from the New York Rangers, and he will play some important minutes for the Leafs this upcoming season. And I think he scored 19 goals for Toronto. So that was a good pickup there. Now, Guy had played 2 games with the Rangers. That's all he'd done in his career so far. But he would go on to play 113 games for the Leafs, scoring 28 goals with 17 assists for 45 points. Guy then flipped over to the WHA for 3 seasons, 1972-73, I'm sorry, for the Ottawa Nationals, and then 73 through 75 with the Toronto Toros, and 74-75 with the Michigan Stags, who became the Baltimore Blades that same year, as well as the Toros. He scored 20 goals in his first 2 seasons in the WHA as well. So he was putting the puck in the net in that league as well. So for the reverse draft, the Leafs lost John Wright to the Vancouver Canucks of the WHL. John would then go on to play for the Vancouver Canucks of the NHL. I think, if I'm not mistaken, what happened is the Canucks of the WHL, I'm pretty sure their roster uh, flipped over to the NHL team, if I'm not mistaken. But as well as the Canucks in the NHL, John also played for the St. Louis Blues and the Kansas City Scouts. They'll be coming here soon too in the 1970s. He would play 127 NHL games and score 16 goals. This set up then for the following day, on June the 10th, 1970, um, the expansion draft for these 2 new teams to make some selections. So the Buffalo Sabres um, selected first, going with Tom Webster off of the Stanley Cup winning Boston Bruins. That was their first selection. Um, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each selection made off the Toronto Maple Leafs roster. Uh, and just to let you know ahead of time, this ain't as bad as the 1967 expansion draft. This one worked a little bit better for Toronto, who was selected. But first off the Leafs roster, he was an everyday player. So everything isn't sunshine and rainbows and beautiful flowers here for the Leafs. With the 8th selection of the expansion draft, um, defenseman Pat Quinn was selected off of the Leafs roster, and he went to the Vancouver Canucks. Pat had played 99 games with 2 goals, 12 assists for 14 points, along with 185 penalty minutes. Pat would go on to play another 507 NHL games, scoring 16 goals with 101 assists for 117 points, and also would accumulate 767 penalty minutes. Pat was dependable, as well as he would go on to play the full 80 games in 2 separate occasions, which is pretty good for a guy who played, say, recklessly, but like with a lot of aggression and wasn't afraid to throw his weight around or get into the odd fisticuff or fight. So he played a full game sometimes. So I'm sure he played hurt often as well. Now, the next guy selected off the Leafs roster was center Danny Johnson. He was also selected by the Vancouver Canucks with the 16th pick overall. Danny had played just one game with the Leafs, but he would go on to go on to play, I'm sorry, 119 games, scoring 18 goals with 19 assists for 37 points. Danny, like many other players, he jumped over to the WHA and played there for 3 seasons, and he played with the Winnipeg Jets. He played 232 games with 53 goals, 58 assists for 111 points. The next player off the Toronto Maple Leafs roster was newly acquired defenseman Chris Evans. He was selected 25th with a 25th pick. This time it was to the Buffalo Sabres who made this pick. Um, as I mentioned in the previous video, that Chris would go on to play 239 more NHL games and 204 WHA games. So he's still got quite a bit left in his career. Uh, the next player selected, and he is the final player selected off the Toronto Maple Leafs roster, was center Ron Ward. And he was selected with the 30th pick, and it was by the Vancouver Canucks. Ron would go on to play 71 NHL games and 359 in the WHA as well. So, as I said, this was a much better outcome for the Leafs than the previous expansion draft. As for example, in that one, they lost the likes of Hall of Famer Terry Sawchuk and defenseman Bobby Vaughn and Kent Douglas. Here, they lost Pat Quinn, and there were some other guys too that went on to go into the WHA, but they certainly weren't as big names as Vaughn or Douglas after that expansion draft there. So there you have it. There are the intra-league reverse and the expansion draft of 1970. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit like, subscribe as well. I've got other videos in here talking about the NHL hockey and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if you want to comment on anything, you can do that as well. So anyways, have yourself an excellent day.